Following story is a translated and adapted conversation, recounting supernatural experiences from around the world. This content is intended for entertainment purposes only. Listen with an open mind and enjoy the thrill of the unknown. The content in this video is purely for entertainment. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are easily frightened, be prepared some stories might just send chills down your spine. If you're ready, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and immerse yourself in the world of the unexplained. The ghost who hired a movie at Camp Chanet Forest. It started with an unusual phone call. Somchai, a middle-aged traveling film projectionist, was sitting in his small shop in Udon Thani when his old Nokia phone rang. The voice on the other end was deep, slow, and slightly distorted. "I would like to hire you for a film screening at Camp Chanet Forest." Somchai felt a chill run down his spine. Camp Chanet Forest was infamous, known for its eerie atmosphere and supernatural legends, particularly those tied to the Naga spirits. People rarely ventured deep into the forest at night. "Are you sure?" Somchai hesitated. "That's a strange place to show a movie." The caller remained silent for a few seconds before responding. "I will pay triple your usual fee. Just bring your equipment and arrive before sundown." Somchai glanced at his assistant, Wit, a young man in his 20s who had been helping him with film screenings for the past year. Wit raised an eyebrow, clearly eavesdropping on the conversation. "Who's that?" Wit asked. Somchai covered the receiver. "Someone wants us to screen a movie in Camp Chanet Forest." Wit immediately looked uneasy. "That place is cursed, Somchai. You know the stories. No one goes there at night." Somchai nodded but couldn't ignore the offer. Triple the usual fee was tempting. "All right," Somchai said into the phone. "We'll be there before sunset." The voice on the other end simply said, "Good," before the line went dead. The journey to Camp Chanet. Later that afternoon, Somchai, Wit, and two other workers, Ek and Noi, loaded their truck with a 16mm film projector, reels, and a large screen. They set off towards Camp Chanet Forest as the sun began its descent. The ride was long and uneventful, but the closer they got, the more uneasy the group felt. The road leading to the forest was narrow and flanked by towering trees. There was a strange stillness in the air, no birds, no insects. As they approached the meeting point, Somchai scanned the surroundings. No sign of the person who had hired them. "Where is our client?" Ek muttered. Somchai took out his phone and dialed the number from earlier. No response. "Maybe they'll come once we start setting up," Wit suggested, though his voice lacked confidence. Reluctantly, they unloaded the equipment and began assembling the screen in a clearing. The old trees around them cast long, unnatural shadows as dusk approached. That was when Somchai noticed something unsettling. There were no signs of human activity. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing to suggest that anyone had been here before them. "Something doesn't feel right," Noi whispered. Then, just as they finished setting up, a gust of wind rustled through the trees, bringing with it an eerie whispering sound. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly. And in that moment, Somchai realized one thing. They were completely alone, or at least they should have been. But as he turned to glance into the darkening forest, he could have sworn he saw silhouettes standing between the trees. The night had fallen. The only light in the clearing came from the dim glow of their truck's headlights and the flickering film projector, casting long, distorted shadows on the trees. The thick silence of Camp Chanet Forest felt suffocating. Somchai wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. "All right, let's start," he muttered, signaling Wit to roll the film. The projector whirred to life, the old 16mm reel spinning, and soon, the first scene of an old Thai action film illuminated the large white screen. The silent crowd. As the film began, Somchai turned towards the forest's edge and froze. Silhouettes. Dozens of dark figures stood between the trees, motionless, watching the screen in absolute silence. Their outlines were faint, barely visible in the dim light. "Look at that," Noi whispered, nudging Wit, his face pale. Wit's mouth hung open. Where did they come from? Ek, the oldest of the crew, took a deep breath and tried to rationalize. "Maybe the locals heard about the movie and came to watch." "But why are they so quiet?" Wit asked. "And why does no one have a flashlight or a phone?" Somchai swallowed hard. Something felt wrong. Usually, at outdoor screenings, the audience would chat, laugh, or react to the movie. But here? Not a single sound, just silent figures standing still. Somchai forced himself to focus on the film. Maybe they were just shy. Maybe they were just watching respectfully. Then he noticed something even stranger. The movie played on, but the audience did not move. No shifting, no adjusting positions, no turning heads. They stood completely still as if frozen in time. Wit nudged Somchai. I don't like this. We should leave. We can't, Somchai whispered back. We took the money. We need to finish the job. But as soon as he said that, the projector flickered. The film glitched, showing distorted images for a brief second. And in that flickering moment, Somchai's heart stopped. Because for just a split second, the screen showed something that wasn't part of the movie. It showed a field of burning bodies. Somchai blinked in horror, but by the time the film stabilized, the normal movie continued as if nothing had happened. What the hell was that? Noi whispered, his hands shaking. I don't know, Somchai said, voice unsteady. Just keep playing it, maybe it was a film error. But deep down, he knew. Something unnatural was happening. And then the worst part came. As Somchai glanced back at the audience, his breath caught in his throat. The figures were disappearing. One by one, the silhouettes faded into nothingness as if melting into the darkness. Within seconds, the entire crowd was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. Somchai and his crew stood frozen, their blood running cold. And that was when Wit whispered the most terrifying thing of all. Somchai, look at the ground. Somchai looked down and saw no footprints. Whoever or whatever had been watching had never actually been there. The moment they realized there were no footprints, the air around them turned suffocating. Somchai's hands trembled as he turned off the projector. The whirring sound faded, and silence swallowed them. The vast emptiness of Camp Chanet Forest stretched before them, no sign of the audience that had been there just moments ago. This isn't right, Noi whispered. His voice was barely audible over the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. Wit's breathing was shallow. What the hell just happened? No one had an answer. Ek, the oldest of the group, tried to keep his cool. We were probably just tired. Maybe it was a trick of the light. No, Somchai said, shaking his head. We all saw them. We all saw them disappear. The forest seemed to close in around them. Every shadow felt alive. Every tree seemed to whisper secrets they couldn't understand. Then, crunch, a footstep, from the darkness behind the screen. The crew turned at the same time, eyes wide with fear. Nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. Eek's voice was tense. We pack up, now. They moved fast. Noi yanked the film reel from the projector. Wit folded the screen, his hands shaking. Somchai tried to keep calm, but his skin crawled with the undeniable feeling that they were being watched. And then, the whispering started. It began as a faint murmur, like a distant conversation. But there was no one else around. Then the whispers grew closer. Low voices, speaking words they couldn't understand, circling around them. Some of the whispers sounded like laughter, while others sounded like crying. Noi gasped, who's there? The whispering stopped. A deep silence followed. Then, a voice clearer than the rest, coming from directly behind them, whispered Somchai's name, Somchai. Somchai spun around, and there was no one there. His heart pounded. His mouth was dry. Did you hear that? He stammered. Noi and Wit nodded slowly. Their faces were pale. Ek muttered a prayer under his breath. We need to leave. They grabbed the last of their equipment and ran towards the truck. The whispers followed them, surrounding them from every direction, growing louder, more desperate, more angry. It felt like the forest itself was trying to keep them there. Finally, they reached the truck. Somchai fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking too much to fit them into the ignition. Come on, come on, come on. Noi screamed. The whispers stopped. Silence. Then, a loud bang on the side of the truck. Something had hit it, hard. Everyone screamed. Somchai turned the key and the engine roared to life. The headlights flashed onto the dirt road, illuminating the path ahead. And for just a split second, standing in the middle of the road, they saw a tall, shadowy figure with hollow eyes staring at them. Somchai hit the gas. The truck sped forward, barreling through the night, away from Camp Chanet Forest. But as they fled, the whispers did not stop. They followed them, riding the wind, whispering their names. And Somchai had the terrifying realization. This wasn't over. The truck raced down the dirt road, headlights cutting through the thick darkness. Somchai gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Noi sat frozen in the passenger seat, heart pounding against his ribs. In the back, Ek and Wit clutched onto the equipment, their breaths uneven, eyes darting toward the shadowed trees lining the path. But even as they fled, the whispers followed. Low, distorted voices crawled into their ears, whispering their names in a language that made no sense. Some were giggling, others weeping. And then, something hit the roof of the truck. Thump! Somchai swerved. What the hell was that? Ek turned to look through the back window, and his face went pale. Oh my god. The others turned just in time to see something slide off the top of the truck and land on the road behind them. A shadowy figure, its limbs too long, its face blurred, but its eyes empty and hollow, staring directly at them. And then, it started running after them. Somchai pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck's tires kicked up dirt, speeding past trees that looked identical, as if they had been driving in circles. Wit checked his phone. No signal. The GPS was frozen. We should have hit the main road by now, Noi stammered, voice shaking. We're trapped, Ek whispered. The forest outside seemed to warp, twisting in unnatural ways. Trees shifted, their branches stretching toward the truck. Shadows flickered between them, darting closer and closer. And then, out of nowhere, a giant movie screen stood in the middle of the road. The same one they had just packed up. The film was still rolling. The projector, which should have been in the back of their truck, was there, playing a movie they had never seen before. On the screen, a recording of them played. Not from earlier that night, it was showing them right now. Them inside the truck, the exact moment they were in. Somchai slammed the brakes. The whispers grew louder, surrounding them from every direction. And then, the screen flickered. The image changed. It now showed the audience. The same people they had seen earlier, motionless, staring at the screen, faces blank, eyes lifeless. And slowly, each head turned toward the camera. Toward them, one by one, they smiled. A voice, deeper than anything human, echoed through the trees. Finish the show. Somchai's hand shook. His breath was ragged. No, this isn't real. The audience on the screen started to stand up. The figures in the forest started moving toward the truck. The whispers turned into screams. Noi clutched his head, his body trembling. Wit was praying under his breath. Eek's eyes were filled with horror. We should have never come here. Somchai tried to start the truck. The engine stalled. The figures drew closer. On the screen, the camera zoomed in on them, trapping them inside the movie. And then, the screen shut off. Everything went black. The show must go on. The next morning, locals passing by found their truck abandoned on the road leading out of Camp Chanted Forest. Inside, the film reels sat neatly stacked, the projector resting beside them. But Somchai, Noi, Ek, and Wit were nowhere to be found. The only thing left behind was the final frame from the movie. A grainy, distorted image of four men, standing in the middle of a vast, empty audience, staring directly at the camera. Their faces blurred, their eyes hollow. And in the corner of the film strip, a title was burned into the celluloid. The show never ends. A grainy, distorted image of four men, standing in the middle of a vast, empty audience, staring directly at the camera. Their faces blurred, their eyes hollow. And in the corner of the film strip, a title was burned into the celluloid. The show never ends. The next morning, the villagers gathered at the entrance of Camp Chanted Forest. A rumor had spread Somchai and his team never returned home. Their families, desperate for answers, pleaded with the locals to search for them. A small search party was formed, led by an elderly man named Uncle Thong, who had lived near Camp Chanted his entire life. With weathered hands and knowing eyes, he held his wooden walking stick tightly, his face dark with concern. "This isn't the first time," he muttered. "What do you mean?" asked one of the villagers. Uncle Thong sighed. "People disappear here. Some are found. But they never return the same." The group exchanged uneasy glances before heading into the woods, the abandoned truck. It didn't take long for them to find Somchai's truck, parked awkwardly by the dirt path. The keys were still in the ignition, the doors left slightly open. Inside, everything was untouched: the film reels, the projector, even the cash from the mysterious client was still there. But the men Somchai, Noi, Ek, and Wit were gone. No tracks led away from the vehicle, no signs of struggle. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. One of the younger men in the search party, Lek, turned to Uncle Thong. "What do you think happened?" The old man's grip on his stick tightened. "They were taken." Lek frowned. "Taken by who?" Uncle Thong exhaled slowly. "Long ago, before this forest was called Kamchanad, the land belonged to the serpent spirits. It is said that the Naga ruled these parts and did not tolerate those who disturbed their home." The villagers listened in silence. There is an old belief that spirits still roam these trees, watching, waiting. They can trick your eyes, steal your voice, and if they take a liking to you, he tapped his walking stick on the ground. They keep you. The group shuddered. Lex swallowed hard. "So what do we do now?" Uncle Thon looked at the forest, his expression grim. "We pray they come back." A whisper in the wind. As the sun began to set, the search party split into smaller groups. They called out Somchai's name. They walked through the thick undergrowth, looking for any sign, any clue. But the deeper they went, the quieter it became. No insects, no birds, just silence. Then Lek heard something. A whisper, his name. Spoken in Somchai's exact voice. "Lek, come here." His blood turned cold. Lek turned around and froze. Standing between the trees was Somchai. Or at least something that looked like him. But there was something wrong. Somchai's face was blurred, shifting like a bad TV signal. His body twitched unnaturally, like a puppet, on invisible strings, and then he smiled. Too wide, too unnatural. Lek tried to scream, but his throat locked up. And in that moment, he knew. Somchai was no longer Somchai. Lek stood frozen. His breath hitched in his throat as the distorted figure of Somchai tilted its head, as if studying him. The whispering voice continued, calling his name in a tone that was almost amused. "Lek, don't be afraid, come closer." No. Everything inside him screamed nitrogen monoxide. But his legs wouldn't move. The trees around him blurred, twisting into shadows that seemed to reach out. The air became heavy, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. And then the thing that looked like Somchai took a step forward. Its feet didn't touch the ground. Lek's heart pounded. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But all he could do was watch in horror as the figure's mouth stretched wider than any human should be able to. And from that darkness, more voices joined in. The return. A sudden chanting broke through the night. Uncle Thong's voice rang loud and clear, his prayers echoing through the forest. The moment the words left his lips, the figure of Somchai flickered like a dying flame. Its grin vanished. A gust of wind tore through the trees, sending chilled air rushing over Lek's skin. And in that instant, the figure disappeared. Lek gasped, stumbling backward. He was alone again. The whispers were gone. The presence had vanished. And then, from the darkness, a voice. "Help us." Lek turned sharply. Somchai, Noi, Ek, and Wit stood there. Their clothes were torn. Their faces pale and hollow, eyes dark as if they had seen something no human should. They looked lost, confused, but they were alive, or at least they seemed to be. The search party rushed them back to the village. Their families cried with relief, but something was off. Somchai and his team couldn't explain what happened. They only remembered the movie starting, then darkness. Nothing else. And there was one more thing. They never blinked. Days passed, and though they returned to their normal routines, the villagers whispered behind their backs. They weren't the same. Somchai didn't laugh the same way. Noi's smile never quite reached his eyes. And one night, a villager passing by Somchai's house swore they saw him standing in the dark, unmoving, staring at nothing for hours. Weeks later, Somchai's mother found something hidden under his bed. It was a roll of film, the same one from that night. Curious, she held it up to the light, and then she dropped it, screaming. Because in every frame of the film, the entire audience was there. Hundreds of shadowy figures sitting silently, watching, waiting. And in the last frame, they were all smiling. The long-awaited holiday had finally arrived for Mike and Jay, two lifelong friends from Bangkok. Both had been stuck in the endless cycle of work, deadlines, and city chaos. This break was their chance to escape the noise and reconnect with nature. Their destination? Hineric Waterfall. nestled deep inside Cowd, a national park, a place known for its breathtaking beauty and chilling legends. Mike, the more adventurous of the two, couldn't hide his excitement as he loaded their bags into his old SUV. Dude, I've been dreaming about this trip for months. Just us, nature, and no emails. Jay, more cautious and superstitious by nature, gave a hesitant smile. Yeah. Just don't forget the stories about Ineric. People say weird stuff happens there. Mike rolled his eyes. Come on, those are just ghost stories to scare tourists. We'll be fine, but deep down, even Mike couldn't shake the slight unease growing in his chest. The sun was just beginning to rise as they left the city behind, driving along Highway 1 toward Nakhon Nayok. The smooth road curved gently through small villages, endless green fields, and dense forests that whispered secrets from centuries past. The mood in the car was light at first, music blasting, snacks being devoured, and the occasional terrible joke from Mike. But as the road narrowed and twisted deeper into the heart of the park, the air grew heavier, and silence began to creep in. The vibrant greens of the jungle seemed darker here, the shadows between trees growing unnervingly deep. Jay couldn't help but glance nervously out the window. Have you noticed how quiet it's gotten? Mike shrugged, but the tension was starting to get to him, too. We're just in the middle of the forest. Nature's peaceful out here. A beat of silence passed. Then, out of nowhere, a soft giggle echoed faintly from the trees. Both men froze. Did you hear that? Jay's voice was low, tight with fear. Mike swallowed hard. It's probably just an animal, maybe a monkey. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at the edges of his confidence. By late afternoon, they finally arrived at the designated camping area near Ineric Waterfall. The sound of rushing water in the distance should have been comforting, but instead, it only added to the oppressive feeling that had been building since they entered the forest. They set up their tent quickly, trying to shake off the unease. That night, as they sat around a small campfire, Jay broke the silence. You remember the story, right, about the kid who fell into the waterfall? Mike sighed. Yeah, tragic accident, right? Jay's eyes didn't leave the fire. Some say his spirit never left. People have reported hearing laughter near the falls. Like a child still playing. The air grew colder. The fire's crackle seemed louder now. Mike forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. Ghost stories, man, just stories. But deep inside, both of them knew that some stories had roots in truth. Little did they realize, the real horror was only beginning, and soon, they'd learned that some laughter doesn't come from joy but from something far more sinister. Mike and Jay, two friends on a long-awaited vacation, have arrived at Ineric Waterfall. Despite their excitement, a strange unease has followed them since their journey began, especially after hearing an unexplained giggle from the dense jungle. The jungle transformed as night fell. The lively chirping of birds faded into an unsettling silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a branch under some unseen force. Their campfire cast long, dancing shadows on the trees, creating figures that seemed to twist and move when they weren't looking directly at them. Mike threw another log onto the fire, the flames flaring up briefly. We'll be fine, he said, more to himself than to Jay. We just need some sleep. Jay wasn't so sure. Every gust of wind carried a strange heaviness with it, a sense that something unseen was watching them from the darkness just beyond the fire's reach. Sometime past midnight, Jay stirred awake to the feeling of being watched. The forest outside was unnervingly still. He listened closely until he heard it again. A faint, playful giggle. This time, it was clearer, closer. Jay sat up and shook Mike awake. Dude, wake up, it's back. The laugh. Mike gradually rubbed his eyes. You're hearing things, man. Just go back to, giggle. This time, Mike heard it too. His eyes snapped open, fully alert. Okay, that's not funny anymore. Without thinking, Mike grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside the tent, sweeping the beam across the trees. Nothing, just darkness and silence. Until the beam landed on something unusual. Small footprints. They were faint but unmistakable, tiny, barefoot impressions in the damp soil, leading toward the edge of the clearing. Jay, come here. You need to see this. Against their better judgment, curiosity dragged them both toward the footprints. Each step deeper into the forest felt heavier, as if the air itself was thickening around them. Suddenly, the footprints just stopped. Right in the middle of the path, no signs of turning around. No disturbance in the undergrowth. It was as if the child had simply vanished into thin air. Jay's breath hitched. This doesn't make sense. Where could they have gone? Mike scanned the treetops. Maybe. Splash! Both of them froze as the sound echoed through the silence. The unmistakable noise of water coming from the direction of the waterfall. The rushing sound of Hineric waterfall grew louder as they approached. Moonlight reflected off the cascading water, creating ghostly patterns that danced across the rocks. And then they saw it. A small figure, standing on the very edge of the cliff, just before the waterfall plunged into the abyss below. A child, barely visible in the mist, her long black hair covering her face. She didn't move. Jay whispered, "Mike, do you see that?" Mike nodded slowly, his mouth dry. "Yeah, we should go back." But before they could turn around, the figure tilted its head unnaturally slow and laughed. The same chilling giggle that had haunted them since they arrived. Mike and Jay had just arrived at Hineric Waterfall after a long, winding journey through the dense jungle. The excitement of their vacation quickly turned into unease after hearing what sounded like a child's laughter echoing through the trees despite being completely alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the once vibrant jungle became cloaked in deep shadows. The only sounds were the rush of water crashing down the falls and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Jay, clutching a flashlight, glanced nervously at Mike. "Did you hear that again?" Jay whispered, his voice almost swallowed by the roar of the waterfall. Mike nodded slowly. "Yes, like a giggle. But there's no way a kid would be out here this late." They set up camp a few hundred meters from the waterfall. The uneasy silence between them was thick with tension. The earlier excitement of their adventure had faded, replaced by a creeping dread neither could explain. Later that night, as they sat around their small campfire, the laughter returned closer this time. It was faint but unmistakable, a child's high-pitched giggle that seemed to circle around them. Jay's hand trembled slightly as he pointed his flashlight toward the trees. "Mike, what if this is one of those stories? You know, the ghost legends about Hineric." Mike tried to brush it off. "Those stories are just..." Before he could finish, something moved just beyond the edge of the light. A shadow, small. Quick! The laughter stopped abruptly. They froze. The air around them grew heavier, as if something unseen was watching. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, and in that brief second of darkness, Mike saw it, a small silhouette standing by the trees, head slightly tilted, watching them. When the light returned, the figure was gone. Jay's voice cracked. "Did you see that?" Mike's jaw tightened. "Yeah, and I think we need to leave, now." But as they packed up in a rush, the sound returned again, closer than ever. Only this time, it wasn't laughter, it was a whisper, "Play with me." The whisper lingered in the air, wrapping around them like the thick jungle mist. Mike's pulse pounded in his ears as he zipped up his backpack with trembling hands. "Jay, we need to get out of here now," Mike hissed, his voice low but urgent. Jay, pale and wide-eyed, nodded silently. They grabbed their flashlights and started toward the narrow trail leading back to the park entrance. Every snap of a twig or brush of leaves against their shoulders felt like fingers reaching out from the dark. But as they hurried along the path, the laughter returned. It wasn't coming from behind them anymore, it was ahead. Giggle, giggle. Jay stopped suddenly, clutching Mike's arm. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Mike followed his friend's trembling gaze. There, just a few meters ahead, a small figure stood blocking the path, motionless, its features hidden by the shadows. The faint outline of long, tangled hair was just visible in the moonlight. "That can't be real," Jay muttered. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. The oppressive silence around them was enough to tighten the grip of fear on their hearts. Then, without warning, the figure slowly tilted its head to the side, just as Mike had seen by the camp earlier. The same eerie motion. "Mike, I think we're trapped," Jay said, his voice barely a whisper. Mike scanned the jungle around them. "We'll cut through the trees." "We're not staying on this path." As they turned off the trail and pushed through the thick foliage, the air grew colder. The jungle seemed to close in tighter, every branch clawing at their clothes. But no matter how far they moved, the laughter never faded. It followed them, circling like a predator. Suddenly, Jay's flashlight flickered and died. "Mike," Jay's voice was filled with panic. Mike grabbed Jay's hand, pulling him forward. "Don't stop. Just keep moving." But the laughter was louder now, impossibly close. The trees seemed to whisper in voices that didn't belong to the wind. And then, a sharp, cold breath on the back of Mike's neck. Play with me forever. Mike spun around, shining his flashlight wildly through the thick trees, but there was nothing, no figure, no child, just darkness swallowing the beam. Did you feel that? Mike's voice was shaky. Jay, panting and gripping Mike's arm tightly, nodded. It was right behind us. The jungle seemed alive now. Branches creaked even though there was no wind, and every leaf rustled as if something unseen was slithering just out of sight. Okay, listen, Mike whispered, trying to steady his breathing. We need to head uphill. If we can find higher ground, maybe we'll get cell service or spot the trail again. They moved carefully now, every step slow and deliberate. The laughter had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was too complete, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, Jay froze. Mike looked. In front of them, half buried in the dirt and leaves, lay a small, red shoe. Mike's stomach dropped. It looked brand new, too clean for something that should have been lost in the forest for long. The realization hit them both at once. This can't be here, Jay whispered. This isn't possible. The air grew icy, their breath forming small clouds in the beam of Mike's flashlight. And then they heard it again. A soft, breathy giggle. This time, it was right next to Jay's ear. Jay screamed and stumbled backward, dropping his dead flashlight. Mike grabbed him before he could fall. Run. They sprinted through the jungle, branches slicing across their arms and faces. But no matter how fast they ran, the giggles followed, echoing from every direction. Faster, faster. Suddenly, the ground beneath them vanished. They tumbled down a steep slope, crashing through bushes and rocks until they hit the cold, hard ground below. Mike groaned, pushing himself up. Jay, are you okay? Jay stirred, clutching his ankle. I think I twisted it. Mike looked around, shining his light up the slope. It was too steep to climb, and worse, there was no laughter anymore. No sound at all. Then Mike noticed something carved into a tree nearby, small handprints smeared in dark red. His stomach twisted. We're not alone down here. Suddenly, Jay's phone buzzed. A message appeared on the cracked screen, though there was no signal. You shouldn't have followed me. The jungle's silence shattered with a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. The cold silence pressed against them like a physical weight. Jay clutched his injured ankle while Mike scanned the darkness, his flashlight now flickering weakly. Mike, Jay whispered, voice tight with fear. What if we never get out? Mike forced a calm tone. We will. We just need to keep moving. Someone will find us. But even as he said it, the feeling of dread only deepened. Suddenly, a faint light appeared ahead, an unnatural, bluish glow seeping through the trees. Do you see that? Jay asked, his voice barely audible. Mike nodded. Stay close. They limped toward the glow, but as they drew nearer, the air grew icy, and the oppressive silence returned. The light revealed itself a small clearing with a weathered stone shrine in the center, covered in moss and offerings long decayed. On the shrine's surface, a photograph sat under cracked glass, an image of a young girl with dark eyes, wearing the same red shoes they'd found earlier. Jay's voice trembled. It's her. Suddenly, the air thickened with a whisper. You heard me. The laughter returned, but this time, it wasn't playful. It was full of sorrow and pain, echoing from everywhere at once. Shadows circled them, and the temperature dropped sharply. Mike gritted his teeth. We need to finish this. He reached into his backpack, pulling out a small charm his grandmother had given him before the trip, a protective talisman. Place it on the shrine, Jay urged. Mike carefully laid the charm on the stone, whispering a silent apology to whatever spirit haunted this place. The laughter twisted into a high-pitched wail, shaking the trees around them. Then silence. The cold lifted. The air felt lighter. The oppressive darkness began to recede. Jay's phone suddenly buzzed. The message on the screen read, Thank you. The shadow of the woman at Srinath National Park. The road stretched before them, winding through the misty mountains like a serpent. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine trees. Dan tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the car climbed higher into the wilderness. This is going to be amazing. Khan grinned from the passenger seat, adjusting his sunglasses. A whole week of nothing but nature, fresh air, and a break from reality. Dan chuckled. keeping his eyes on the road. Yeah, man, we deserve this. No work, no stress, just us and the great outdoors. Their plan was simple: drive up to Srinath National Park, set up camp near the famous cliffs, and spend the week hiking, stargazing, and soaking in the beauty of northern Thailand. But as they drove deeper into the mountains, an uneasy feeling crept into Don's chest. The road had become narrower, and the trees pressed in from both sides like silent watchers. The occasional road sign was rusted, barely readable. The farther they went, the fewer cars they saw. "This road feels different," Dan muttered. Kong waved him off. "Dude, it's just because we're out in the middle of nowhere. No streetlights, no buildings, pure nature." Dan nodded, but the feeling didn't go away. As they rounded a sharp curve, a figure appeared ahead, standing on the side of the road. A woman. She was dressed in a white blouse and a long, flowing skirt, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. She stood unnaturally still, her face hidden in the shadow of the trees. Don's heart skipped a beat. "What the hell?" he whispered. Khan leaned forward. "Is she hitchhiking?" The woman did not move. As they got closer, Dan instinctively slowed the car. Something about her felt wrong. Then, just as their headlights illuminated her fully, she vanished. Dan slammed on the brakes. "Shit!" Kong yelled as the tires skidded slightly before coming to a stop. Don's hands trembled on the wheel. "Did you see that? She was just there." Kong exhaled shakily. Yeah, but she's gone." Maybe it was a trick of the light, fog, maybe? Don's pulse pounded in his ears. He knew what he saw. They were still miles away from the national park. The road ahead was empty. But a chill had settled in the car, a silent, invisible presence that neither of them could shake. Without another word, Dan pressed the gas. They drove on, and the trees seemed closer than before. Dan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. The air inside the car was thick with tension, the memory of the vanishing woman still fresh in their minds. "Maybe we should turn back," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Khan, usually the fearless one, let out a shaky laugh. "Dude, we're just freaked out. We're almost there, let's not let our minds play tricks on us." Dan sighed, nodding reluctantly. He didn't want to sound paranoid, but something deep in his gut told him that this trip was not going to be normal. The arrival. After another hour of driving through the lonely mountain roads, they finally reached the entrance to Srinath National Park. The sign, barely illuminated by their headlights, looked old and weathered. The wooden post was cracked, and the words were slightly faded, as if time itself had tried to erase them. Khan hopped out of the car, stretching. "Damn, that was a long drive, but look at this place, man. Totally worth it." Dan stepped out cautiously, taking in the surroundings. The air was strangely still. No sounds of insects, no rustling of leaves. Just silence. He shivered. Khan clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's find a camping spot before it gets too dark." They grabbed their gear and headed into the park. A place to camp. After walking for about 15 minutes, they found a perfect spot, a clearing with a view of the famous cliffs of Srinath. Below them, a thick layer of fog rolled through the valley like an ocean of mist. Khan whistled. "Man, this view is insane." Dan forced a smile. "Yeah, it is." They quickly set up their tent, built a small fire, and sat down to eat. The flames flickered, casting long shadows across the trees. Dan tried to shake off his unease, focusing instead on the stars above. For a while, things felt normal. Then the whispering started. At first, it was faint, a soft murmur carried by the wind. Dan looked up from his food. "Did you hear that?" Kong frowned. "Hear what?" Dan held his breath, listening. The wind sighed through the trees, carrying something else with it, a voice. A woman's voice. It was distant but getting closer. "Help me." Don's stomach twisted. Kong froze. This time, he heard it too. "Help me." The voice was barely audible, like someone whispering from deep within the trees. Don's skin crawled. What the hell is that? Kong swallowed hard, glancing around. Probably just the wind. Yeah, wind does weird shit in the mountains. Dan wasn't convinced, but before he could say anything else, a twig snapped somewhere in the darkness. They both turned toward the trees. Nothing, just darkness. But then Dan saw it. A shadow standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, still. Watching them, Don's breath caught in his throat. Kong, he whispered, barely able to speak. But when he blinked, the shadow was gone. The fire crackled, the wind howled. Dan and Kong sat there, frozen. Somewhere in the trees, something was waiting. The fire flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the ground. Don's heart pounded in his chest. He was sure of what he had seen: a shadow, standing just beyond the trees, watching them. But now, there was nothing. Kong let out a shaky laugh, though it sounded forced. Dude, you're scaring yourself. Don's mouth was dry. I swear I saw something. Kong tossed another log into the fire, the embers crackling. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. You've been on edge since that thing on the road. Dan wanted to believe him. Maybe it really was just the wind, the dark, the exhaustion messing with his head. And yet, deep in his gut, he knew something was wrong. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. The earlier whispering sound was gone, but a strange, unsettling stillness had settled around them. Dan yawned and rubbed his arms. We should get some sleep. Big hike tomorrow. Kong nodded, finishing his last sip of water before crawling into the tent. Dan followed, zipping the entrance shut behind him. But as he lay down, staring at the thin fabric of the tent, his mind kept replaying the shadow. The way it stood so still, the way it seemed to watch them. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and then something woke him up. Don's eyes flew open, his breath hitched. Crunch, a footstep, right outside their tent. His body went rigid. His mind raced. Maybe it was Kong. Slowly, Dan turned his head, peeking toward Kong's sleeping bag. Kong was still there, fast asleep. Crunch, another step, closer. Dan squeezed his eyes shut. His hands clenched the sleeping bag. His heart slammed against his ribs. Then a shadow passed over the tent. It was faint, just a flicker against the fabric. But Dan saw it. Someone or something was outside. Dan held his breath, hoping it would go away. But then, from just beyond the thin fabric of the tent, a whisper, soft, deliberate, "Come here." Don's blood ran cold. "Come closer." The voice was unmistakably female. His body refused to move, every muscle frozen in sheer terror. Then the tent zipper moved. It started to open. Dan finally reacted. "Kong, wake up," he shouted, shaking his friend violently. Kong jolted awake, confused. What's going on?" Dan scrambled for his flashlight and shined it at the tent entrance. Nothing. The zipper was partially open, but there was no one there. Kong sat up, rubbing his face. "Jesus, man, what the hell?" Don's breath was shaky. There was something outside. "I swear, I saw a shadow." And the zipper, it started moving on its own. Kong grabbed his own flashlight and turned it toward the trees. Nothing but endless darkness. "Dan, look, you're freaking yourself out," Kong said, though there was an uneasiness in his voice. "No one's here." Dan wasn't convinced, but what could he say? That a whisper had called to him. That something had tried to open their tent in the middle of the night. He took a deep breath. Maybe he was just sleep deprived. Kong sighed. "Let's go back to sleep. All right, we have a long hike tomorrow." Dan nodded numbly, lying back down, though he knew he wouldn't be sleeping again tonight. And outside, just beyond their campsite, a shadow stood at the edge of the cliff, watching, waiting. The night stretched on in eerie silence. Dan lay awake in his sleeping bag, heart still racing from what had just happened. Every creak of the trees, every rustle of leaves sent shivers through his body. He could still hear the voice in his head, soft, whispering, calling to him. "Come here, come closer." Dan didn't dare close his eyes again. By the time the first light of dawn seeped through the trees, Dan felt like he had barely rested. Kong stirred beside him, stretching and yawning. "You look like hell," Kong said, rubbing his eyes. Dan sat up slowly. "Didn't sleep," Kong sighed. "Man, you really let last night get to you, huh?" "Look, it was probably the wind or some animal messing with the tent." Dan didn't argue, but deep inside, he knew what he had experienced. They packed up their camp and prepared for the long trek ahead. The trail they were taking would lead them to the famous Fa Chu Cliff, one of the most breathtaking viewpoints in the entire park. As they walked, Dan couldn't shake the unease clinging to him. The deeper they went into the forest, the heavier the air felt, like something unseen was watching. 2 hours into the hike, They reached a clearing where the land sloped downward into mist-covered hills. The scenery was stunning, but Dawn's eyes were drawn to something far more disturbing. A figure stood at the edge of the cliff, a woman. She was facing away from them, wearing a flowing white dress, her long black hair cascading down her back. Dan froze. Something about her felt off. "Kong, do you see that?" Kong followed Dawn's gaze. The moment his eyes landed on the woman, his face went pale. "No way," Kong whispered. She wasn't there a second ago." Dawn's breath hitched. "Should we go check?" Kong hesitated. "Hell no, dude. Something's not right." But even as Kong said it, the woman started to turn. Her movements were slow and unnatural, like a glitch in a video. And then her face was visible. Dawn's stomach dropped. She had no eyes. The plunge. Dan and Kong stumbled backward. The woman's hollow sockets were nothing but darkness. Her lips curved into a twisted smile. Then, she stepped forward. And she fell, right off the cliff. Dan gasped and ran toward the edge, his mind screaming at him to stop, but his body moving on instinct. He looked down, nothing, no body, no sign of impact. Just endless mist swirling at the bottom of the cliff. Kong grabbed his arm. "We need to get out of here, now." Dan nodded, barely able to breathe. As they turned to leave, a whisper drifted from the edge. "Come here." Don's blood froze, and just before they ran, he saw something in the corner of his eye. The woman was standing in the trees behind them, watching, waiting, and smiling. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows, it was alive. Every branch seemed to reach out. Every gust of wind whispered secrets that Dan and Kong didn't want to hear. The memory of the eyeless woman standing in the trees behind them clawed at their minds as they ran down the narrow path. The air grew thick, like invisible hands were trying to slow them down. "Dan, faster!" Kong shouted, his voice sharp with panic. Don's legs burned with exhaustion, but the fear propelling him forward was stronger than any physical pain. He could still hear the whispering behind them. "Come back. You can't leave." After what felt like hours, they finally stopped to catch their breath. Sweat dripped from their foreheads, and the air was unnaturally cold. Kong pulled out his phone. "We should be close to the trailhead by now." He opened the GPS and froze. "What's wrong?" Dan asked, panting. Kong showed him the screen. No signal, and worse, the map showed nothing but endless forest. "This can't be right," Kong muttered, scrolling frantically. "We were supposed to be out of here by now." Dan looked around. The trail they had been following was gone, vanished. There was no sign of a path, only dense trees pressing in on all sides. "We're lost," Dan whispered. Kong's hands trembled as he put his phone away. "We have to keep moving. Maybe we can find a landmark, or..." A sharp, high-pitched scream cut through the forest. Both men froze. It was coming from behind them. They started running again, pushing through thick undergrowth. Branches scratched their faces and arms, leaving angry red marks. Every time Dan dared to glance back, he saw shadows moving between the trees too fast to be human. Suddenly, the forest opened up to a clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling spirit house, covered in moss and surrounded by wilting offerings, faded flowers, melted candles, and broken figurines. "Why would there be a spirit house all the way out here?" Dan asked, voice shaking. Kong didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something lying next to the small shrine. A shoe. Don's stomach twisted. It was a hiking boot, the same brand Kong was wearing. "It's mine," Kong whispered. "But how?" The air grew colder. Behind them, the whisper returned. "You're already mine." Dan turned slowly, dread pooling in his chest. She was there again. The eyeless woman. Her white dress floated unnaturally in the air, and touched by the wind. This time, she was close enough that Dan could see the tears of blood streaking down her pale cheeks. "Don't look at her," Kong screamed, yanking Dan away. They sprinted toward the other side of the clearing, diving into the trees. But no matter how fast they ran, the forest didn't end. The trees blurred together, the sky darkened, time twisted. Dan glanced behind them one last time and she was there. Closer, reaching out, and then everything went black. Dan awoke to the sound of rustling leaves and an eerie silence that wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. His head throbbed, and every muscle in his body ached. The air was colder now, thick with dampness, and the faint smell of earth and decay filled his nostrils. Kong, his voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. No answer. Dan slowly sat up, the memory of the eyeless woman flashing like a knife in his mind. The clearing, the spirit house, the chilling touch of her unseen hand, it all felt like a nightmare, except for the dull ache in his chest. He was alone. The forest around him was deathly still. No wind, no birds, no insects, only silence. Dan forced himself to stand and looked around, but the trees seemed endless in every direction. There was no sign of the spirit house, no sign of Kong. His heart pounded. This can't be happening. I just need to find the trail. Kong has to be nearby. Then, just as he took his first shaky step forward, a soft whisper floated through the air. Dan. The voice was familiar. It was Kong's voice, his breath caught in his throat. Kong, is that you? The voice came again, clearer now. Help me. Without thinking, Dan ran toward the sound, his shoes slipping on wet leaves. The whisper led him deeper into the forest, weaving between the gnarled trees like a ghost. Every time he thought he was close, the voice would move, pulling him farther in. Suddenly, he stumbled into another clearing, but this one was different. In the middle of the clearing stood a second spirit house identical to the one from before, but this time the offerings were fresh. Candles burned with steady flames, untouched by wind. A soft chanting filled the air, though no one was there. Don's stomach turned when he noticed something lying at the base of the shrine. Kong's jacket. His voice cracked as he whispered, "No, no, no, no." The air behind him shifted. He turned slowly and she was there. The eyeless woman stood just a few feet away, her head tilted slightly as if listening to his fear. Her mouth moved, but no words came out, only that same cold whisper filling Don's head. "Stay with me." Dan stumbled back, his mind screaming for him to run, but his body felt like it was sinking into the ground. The forest closed in around him, the trees tightening like a noose. Then a voice broke through the fog. Kong. It was faint, but it was real. Desperation fueled his final burst of energy. Dan turned and ran blindly through the trees, the whispers growing louder behind him, pulling at his sanity. He didn't stop until he saw light, real sunlight breaking through the trees. He crashed into an open path, collapsing onto the dirt trail. His vision blurred, and before everything went black, he heard a familiar voice. Dan, hey, stay with me, Kong. Dan woke up in a hospital bed days later. Kong sat beside him, pale but alive. They found us near the edge of the park, Kong explained. We were missing for 2 days. Don's voice was weak. The woman, did you see her? Kong nodded slowly. I saw her, and I think she let us go. But that night, as Dan tried to sleep, a soft whisper echoed in his ears. Stay with me. The shadow of the woman from Srinan had followed him home. The sun hung low, painting the sky a dull orange, as Sergeant Chai led his squad into the dense jungle along the Myanmar border. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth and rotting leaves. 5 men trudged through the undergrowth. Chai, the grizzled leader with 15 years on the border. Lieutenant Krit, his stern deputy, Private Sonchai, the jittery rookie. Corporal Lek, the squad's loudmouth, and Private Boone, the silent radio operator. Their mission was routine for days: to patrol a 20-kilometer stretch, check for smugglers or crossings, and report back. Simple, but the jungle had other plans. The first day unfolded quietly. Boots sank into mud, machetes hacked through vines, and the canopy above blocked out the sun. The soldiers bantered to ease the monotony, Lek cracking jokes about ghosts, Somchai asking nervous questions about the local legends. Chai ignored it. He'd heard the tales. Pachathep, the spirit forest, where the dead lingered. Superstition, he thought. Still, the jungle felt alive, its sounds to deliberate rustling leaves, distant bird calls, a faint hum beneath it all. By noon, they stopped at a stream to rest. Somchai knelt to fill his canteen, then froze. Sarge, you hear that? Chai listened. At first, just the jungle's chorus. Then, a murmur, low, overlapping voices, too faint to decipher. Wine, Chai said, though doubt gnawed at him. Boone clutched the radio tighter, saying nothing. Lek smirked. Wine, don't whisper, Sarge. Krit shot him a glare. Move out. The murmurs followed them, weaving through the trees as the trail narrowed. By dusk, they set up camp in a small clearing. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced too eagerly. Chai saw at first a silhouette, humanoid but twisted, standing just beyond the light. He blinked, and it vanished. "Anyone see that?" he asked. "See what?" Lek replied, his grin faltering. No one spoke. The jungle fell silent, an oppressive stillness that pressed against their ears. Chai gripped his rifle and told himself it was fatigue. But sleep came hard that night, the whispers lingering in his dreams. Dawn broke heavy with mist. The squad packed up, their movements sluggish, eyes darting to the trees. The murmurs were gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. Chai led them deeper, the jungle growing denser, vines like ropes, roots clawing at their boots. Around midday, they stumbled on an abandoned outpost, its wooden walls rotting, overrun with creepers. "Old border post," Crit said, stepping inside. "Haven't used these in years." Inside, the air was stale. A rusted table, a broken chair, and scratches on the walls, deep and jagged, forming symbols none of them recognized. Somchai traced one with his finger, then yanked his hand back. "Feels wrong," he muttered. "Probably smugglers," Chai said, unconvinced. As they left, Lek tripped over something half buried, a cracked helmet. "High military issue, stained with something dark. Blood?" he asked, half joking. "Old," Boone whispered, his first words all day. "Too old." That afternoon, the whispers returned, louder, calling their names. Chai, Lek, Somchai. The voices drifted from all directions, soft but insistent. The squad froze, rifles raised. "Who's out there?" Crit shouted. No answer, just the echoes fading into the trees. "Stay sharp," Chai ordered, his voice steady despite the chill down his spine. By nightfall, they camped near a banyan tree, its gnarled roots sprawling like fingers. The fire barely pierced the darkness. Then Somchai screamed, pointing at the trees. Faces pale, Alice peered from the shadows, vanishing when Chai swung his flashlight. Tricks of the light. Crit barked, but his hands shook. Boone sat apart, muttering prayers under his breath. The whispers grew into a chant, rhythmic and alien, until the fire flared green and died. They relit it, hearts pounding, and took turns on watch. No one slept. The third day dawned gray, the sky swallowed by the canopy. The squad moved like ghosts, exhaustion etching their faces. The jungle shifted around them, paths they'd marked disappeared. Trees seemed closer than before. The whispers were constant now, a drone that burrowed into their skulls. Mid-morning, Boone vanished. One moment he was behind them, the next gone. They searched, shouting his name, but the jungle swallowed their voices. An hour later, he stumbled back, pale and trembling. "It took me," he rasped. "A shadow pulled me underground." His uniform was torn, hands scratched raw, but there were no tunnels, no holes. "What shadow?" Chai demanded. Boone just stared, eyes hollow. "It knew my name." That afternoon, they found a clearing that shouldn't have been there, a circle of bare earth, ringed by stones carved with the same symbols from the outpost. In the center, a pile of bones, human and animal, bleached white. Lek kicked one, then froze as a laugh, high and guttural, echoed from the trees. "Enough games," Crit yelled, firing a burst into the canopy. The laughter stopped, but the air grew colder. Night fell like a curtain. The squad huddled around the fire, rifles ready. Then the apparitions came, soldiers in tattered uniforms, Thai and Burmese, their faces rotting, marching silently through the camp. Somchai sobbed, Lek cursed, and Chai fired warning shots that passed through them like smoke. The figures faded, but the message was clear: they weren't alone. At midnight, Boone screamed and ran into the jungle. They chased him, flashlights cutting through the dark, until they found him clawing at a tree, babbling about eyes in the roots. The tree bled when Chai touched it, a thick red sap that stank of death. They dragged Boone back, tying him to keep him still. The whispers became screams, and the ground trembled. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. The final day broke with a blood-red sunrise. The squad was unraveling. Somchai prayed nonstop. Lek's jokes turned to mutters. Boone rocked silently, and Crit's orders grew frantic. Chai felt it too. The jungle wasn't just alive, it was angry. They had one goal: reach the extraction point, 6 kilometers away. The trail twisted impossibly, looping back to the bone circle. The stones pulsed now, glowing faintly. The whispers formed words. Steppe shadows stretched from the trees, humanoid but wrong, limbs too long, heads cocked unnaturally. Chai fired, and they scattered, only to reform. Midday, the entity revealed itself. A figure rose from the earth, tall, cloaked in darkness, its face a shifting mass of eyes and mouths. It spoke in a voice that rattled their bones. "This land is mine. Your blood feeds it." Crit charged, emptying his magazine into it. The bullets dissolved, and the figure laughed, flinging Crit into a tree with a sickening crunch. He didn't get up. Panic took over. Somchai bolted, vanishing into the jungle with a scream. Lek froze, muttering apologies as the shadows tore him apart, piece by piece. Boone stood, eerily calm, and walked toward the entity, whispering, "I hear you." He collapsed, lifeless, as if drained. Chai was alone. The entity loomed, its eyes boring into him. Memories flooded his mind: wars, massacres, bodies piled along the border. This thing was old, born of bloodshed, tethered to the land. One must stay, it hissed. Chai ran, legs burning, the extraction point a faint hope. The jungle clawed at him, roots tripping, vines snaring. Behind, the entity's laughter grew fainter. He stumbled into the open as the chopper landed, collapsing aboard. The pilot didn't ask questions. As they lifted off, Chai looked down. The jungle stared back, thousands of eyes glinting in the trees. He survived, but the whispers followed him home, a debt unpaid. The dense jungles along the Myanmar border have always been mysterious, harboring not only dangers from smugglers and wildlife but also stories whispered through generations of shadows that move on their own. Voices that call from the depths of the forest, and unseen eyes watching from beyond the trees. For Sergeant Niran and his unit, it was supposed to be a routine 4-day patrol and assignment like many before. Their mission: to monitor the dense border region for illegal crossings and ensure national security. But what began as a standard operation soon unraveled into something far more terrifying. The early morning sun cast pale beams of light through the thick jungle canopy as Sergeant Niran adjusted his gear. His team of 4, including Corporal Vishai, Private Somchai, and Lance Corporal Aru, prepared for what seemed like just another assignment. 4 days in the jungle, easy work, Vishai said, trying to mask his nerves with forced confidence. Niran shot him a glance. "It's never easy out here. Stay sharp. This isn't just about the terrain. You know the stories." The group fell silent. Everyone had heard the rumors: disappearing patrols, phantom lights dancing through the trees, and echoes of voices in the dead of night calling soldiers by name. Their journey took them along narrow trails, weaving between towering bamboo and ancient fig trees, the forest alive with the constant hum of cicadas. By sunset, they set up camp near a small, dried-up creek bed. As they ate their meager rations, the wind carried in unsettling sound whispers. "Did you hear that?" Somchai asked, his voice low. "Just the wind," Aru muttered, though his eyes told another story, but Niran knew better. The wind didn't carry voices unless something else was speaking through it. The fire crackled weakly, throwing long shadows across the men's faces as they settled in for the night. Niran took the first watch, scanning the jungle with his flashlight. Hours passed in uneasy silence until snap. A branch broke in the distance. Niran tensed, gripping his rifle. His eyes darted toward the sound's direction, but the thick undergrowth revealed nothing. Then, faintly, he heard it. Niran, his heart hammered in his chest. He turned, expecting to see one of his men, but they were all asleep by the fire. The voice came again, closer this time: "Niran." He spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness, but no one was there. Morning couldn't come soon enough. At dawn, the team prepared to move out. Niran kept his fear to himself, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The jungle around them felt heavier, as if it were closing in. "Let's stay sharp. There's something wrong with this place," he ordered. The trail ahead led them deeper into the jungle, toward an old abandoned outpost, a remnant from conflicts long past. The air grew colder as they approached, even though the midday sun was blazing overhead. Inside the crumbling structure, they found rusted equipment, faded photographs of soldiers long gone, and on one wall deep scratches that hadn't been worn down by time. "It's like something was trying to get out," Vishai whispered, tracing the marks with his fingers. Niran's gut twisted. "Or trying to keep something in." What began as a standard patrol mission for Sergeant Niran and his team quickly turned unsettling. Strange whispers in the night, shadows lurking in the dense foliage, and signs of an unseen presence have already begun to chip away at their sense of safety. Now, as they push deeper into the jungle, the line between reality and nightmare begins to blur. The sun filtered weakly through the thick jungle canopy, casting fragmented rays on the worn-out faces of the team. No one had slept well, especially Naran, whose name had been called by something unseen the night before. "Did anyone else hear anything last night?" Naran asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Sobchai and Aru exchanged uneasy glances, but it was Vishai who finally spoke up. "I thought I heard footsteps circling the camp. But when I looked, there was nothing." Naran nodded, suppressing his own fear. "Stay close, don't wander off the trail." By midday, the group approached a narrow ravine. The air grew thick, as if the jungle itself was pressing down on them. Their boots sank into soft, wet earth with every step, the silence only broken by the distant calls of unseen birds or something that sounded like birds. That's when Sobchai stopped. "Captain, look at this." On the side of the trail were fresh footprints, small, bare, and leading deeper into the forest. They were too small to belong to any of the men. "Children, out here?" Aru asked, doubt lacing his voice. "No, we're miles from any village," Naran replied, his eyes narrowing. "And why would children be barefoot out here?" A chill crept down their spines. Without another word, they pressed on, their movements slower now, every snapped twig making their nerves tighten. By late afternoon, the patrol stumbled upon something unexpected, a small, weathered shrine tucked beneath the roots of a massive tree. Incense sticks, long burned out, lay scattered around, and faded symbols were carved into the stone. "This isn't on any map," Vishai muttered. Naran studied the shrine carefully. It's old, maybe older than the border itself. As they turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, scattering dead leaves and whispering through the branches like distant voices. "Go back." The voice was faint, but clear enough to freeze them in place. "Did you hear that?" Sobchai asked, clutching his rifle tightly. "Yeah," Aru whispered. "We all did." That night, the men set up camp as far from the shrine as they could, though the feeling of being watched never left them. The fire burned low, casting shadows that danced across the dense jungle walls. Naran took the first watch again. Hours passed in silence until he saw something across the fire, figure, just beyond the light's edge. A small child, standing barefoot, staring directly at him. "Naran," Sobchai's voice broke the silence. "Who are you talking to?" Naran blinked. The figure was gone. "I thought I saw something," he muttered, unsure if it was exhaustion or something far more sinister. But deep inside, he knew the jungle was not done with them yet. The third day on patrol began with a heavy mist rolling through the dense jungle. The sun's rays barely penetrated the thick canopy, and every step felt heavier than the last. Captain Anand led the team forward, trying to mask the growing unease that settled over everyone like the damp air around them. Private Sobchai, usually the most talkative of the group, was silent. His eyes darted nervously through the undergrowth. "Did anyone hear that last night?" he finally asked, voice low. It sounded like whispering coming from the trees. Sergeant Wichai gave him a stern look. "The jungle plays tricks on you. Stay focused." But as the day wore on, the whispers returned, soft, unintelligible murmurs floating on the wind. At first, the soldiers dismissed them as natural sounds of the forest. But soon, the whispers became distinct, as if voices were calling their names from the shadows. That night, their campfire struggled against the suffocating darkness. As they tried to rest, Captain Anand heard it too, a soft voice, distant yet familiar, calling his name from beyond the tree line. "Anand." He bolted upright, gun in hand. No one was there. The jungle remained still. Suddenly, a scream tore through the silence. Private Sobchai was missing. His sleeping bag lay empty, the ground disturbed by drag marks leading into the dense foliage. The team rushed into the trees with flashlights, following the trail until it abruptly stopped at a clearing with no footprints, no sign of struggle, only an eerie silence. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint, chilling sound of laughter echoing through the trees. They weren't alone. The fourth day of the patrol began with an eerie silence. The usual sounds of insects and birds seemed to have vanished overnight, leaving the forest unnaturally quiet. Sergeant Naran, exhausted but determined, led the small unit deeper into the jungle. The trees loomed tall and twisted, as if nature itself was watching. The thick fog clung to the ground, swallowing their footsteps. Every branch that cracked underfoot echoed louder than it should have, as if the forest were amplifying their fear. Private Sobchai, the youngest in the group, finally spoke up. "Sergeant, have you heard the legend of the Whispering Shadows?" Niran shot him a tired look but didn't dismiss him. "They say spirits of the lost soldiers from the old conflict still wander this border. Anyone who hears their whispers never returns the same." Niran stayed silent. He had heard stories like this before, superstitions passed down from the older soldiers. But tonight, the forest made him wonder if there was more truth to the legend than he wanted to believe. As night fell, the unit set up camp in a small clearing. Just as they were settling in, Corporal Wanchai froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. The others stopped moving. In the stillness of the night, a faint, breathy murmur echoed through the trees. It was a voice, low and indistinct, calling from the shadows beyond their campfire. "Who's there?" Niran called out, his voice steady but low. No reply, only the chilling return of silence. Suddenly, Somchai's eyes widened with fear. "Sergeant, it's saying my name." Everyone turned to him. The voice grew clearer now, almost playful. The wind seemed to carry the sound, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. Without warning, Somchai staggered toward the edge of the camp, as if drawn by some invisible force. Niran lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Snap out of it," he shouted. Somchai's eyes were glazed, his body cold to the touch. The whispers grew louder, circling the camp, calling for each of them in turn. And then complete silence. The fog lifted just enough for them to realize Somchai was gone. Niran and his team searched the entire area, but there was no trace of Somchai, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. Just the suffocating darkness of the jungle. As dawn approached, Niran found something half buried in the dirt near their camp. Somchai's dog tag, cold as ice. The remaining team members looked at each other with haunted eyes. They knew the truth deep down. Some things in this forest were never meant to be found. The legend of the Whispering Shadows was no longer just a story. As dawn broke on their fourth day of patrol, Sergeant Niran, Private Somchai, and Corporal Anand found themselves deep within the thickest part of the jungle. The air was heavy with mist, and the thick canopy above swallowed the sun's light, leaving them in a perpetual gloom. "We should have reached the checkpoint by now," Somchai muttered, eyes darting nervously around the darkened trail. "The compass says we're on course," Anand replied, but his voice lacked confidence. Every tree seemed to lean closer, every shadow stretched and naturally long. Suddenly, Niran froze. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. A faint rustling echoed through the trees, followed by soft, disjointed whispers. Not words, just sounds, as if the forest itself was murmuring. But there was something more disturbing. The whispers were slowly circling them, moving unseen through the dense foliage. They moved faster, hearts pounding, but the trail beneath their boots seemed unfamiliar, twisting in ways that didn't match the maps or memory. "We're going in circles," Somchai said, pointing to a broken branch they had marked hours ago. Panic flickered in his eyes. "No," Niran replied firmly, though fear was starting to gnaw at him too. "It's something playing tricks on us." As night fell, the forest came alive with eerie sounds, branches snapping in the distance, low growls carried on the wind, and the occasional flash of movement in their peripheral vision. Suddenly, Somchai stumbled and fell, his hand landing on something cold and metallic. When he looked down, his breath caught in his throat, an old-time military dog tag, half buried in the dirt. The name had been scratched off. "This can't be here," Somchai whispered, his voice trembling. "No one's patrolled this deep in years." Niran took a deep breath. "We need to set camp here and stay together. No wandering off. Whatever's out there, it's trying to separate us." As they gathered around their small fire, the jungle seemed to close in even tighter, and those disjointed whispers never stopped. The forest was alive and it was watching. Little did they know, by morning, one of them would be gone. The jungle was unnervingly quiet. The usual symphony of cicadas and rustling leaves had faded into a dead silence. Sergeant Niran, exhausted but determined, led the team forward, their faces hollowed by days of fear and restless nights. Each shadow seemed alive, each gust of wind a whisper from unseen eyes. Suddenly, they stumbled upon something none of them were prepared for: a makeshift shrine deep within the forest. Candles, long melted, formed eerie shapes, and small wooden effigies hung from the trees around them. The air was thick with the scent of decay and incense. Private Somchai froze. "Sir, I've heard stories about this. Some say these shrines mark places where spirits dwell, offerings to keep them calm." Sergeant Niran's voice was hoarse but steady. We move around it, no touching, no speaking until we're clear. But as they skirted the shrine, a cold wind swept through the trees. The shadows seemed to stretch, twisting unnaturally. The sound of footsteps echoed not from the ground but from the trees above. They didn't dare look up. Midnight approached, and the group set up a final camp, their nerves frayed beyond reason. The fire flickered weakly, barely holding back the oppressive darkness. Then, without warning, the wind carried a low chant, voices whispering in a language none of them understood. Suddenly, Private Sanchai screamed. His eyes were wide with terror as he pointed into the shadows. "They're here, they're watching." Sergeant Niran tried to calm him, but before he could react, Samchai collapsed, eyes rolled back, murmuring incoherently. The others circled around him, fear gripping their hearts, when the fire died on its own, plunging them into darkness. All around them, glowing eyes blinked into existence, hundreds of them, watching in silence. Desperation drove Niran to grab Samchai, dragging him up. "We move, now." They didn't sleep that night. As dawn broke, the oppressive presence lifted. The jungle seemed normal again, birds sang, and the wind whispered through the trees like nothing had happened. The soldiers emerged from the jungle days later, hollow-eyed and broken. Samchai never spoke again. When Niran filed his report, he left out the details, no mention of shrines, glowing eyes, or whispers in the dark. Some stories, he knew, were better left untold. But deep in the borderlands, the jungle never forgets.
The Dancer in the Rainy Night. In Thailand's northern province of Nan, where mist clings to jagged mountains and rivers carve through dense forests, the rains come hard and relentless. The locals know better than to linger on the winding, unpaved roads after dark, especially Route 1168, a narrow stretch flanked by bamboo groves and forgotten shrines. For decades, travelers have whispered of a figure seen in the downpour. A woman in a dancer's garb, her silhouette swaying as if to an unseen rhythm. She flags down cars, her presence fleeting, leaving behind only the scent of flowers and the echo of traditional Thai music. They call her Nang Ram Fontokhtha, dancer in the Rainand. Her story is one of beauty, betrayal, and a restless soul bound to the storm. Legend says she was Lamoye, a nartaki from a traveling troupe in the 1960s, renowned for her grace in the Ram Thai dance. On a stormy night, her lover, a jealous musician, lured her to this road under the guise of eloping, only to strangle her in a fit of rage when she refused to abandon her craft for him. Her body was dumped in a roadside ditch, washed away by the floods, and never found. Since then, she haunts Route 1168, her spirit tied to the rain that hid her murder, seeking either solace or vengeance from those who cross her path. It was March 20th, 2025, when Thanet, a 32-year-old mechanic from Chiang Mai, found himself driving through Nan province. He was a practical man, broad-shouldered, calloused hands, with a nonsense air honed by years fixing engines. Thanet didn't believe in ghosts. He trusted what he could touch, what he could repair. But tonight, he was on edge. His younger brother, Golf, had called him in a panic that afternoon, begging him to come to Nan. Golf had crashed his motorbike on a back road, breaking his leg, and needed a ride home from a rural clinic. "I can't wait for an ambulance," he'd pleaded. "It's pouring, here, just hurry." Thanet cursed under his breath as he loaded his old pickup truck, a rusty Isuzu. He'd patched together himself with tools and a tarp. The 6-hour drive was a hassle he didn't need, but family was family. He set out at dusk, the sky already bruising with storm clouds. By the time he reached the outskirts of Nan, rain hammered the windshield, the wipers struggling against the deluge. Route 1168 stretched before him, a slick ribbon of mud and gravel, its edges blurred by water. His headlights carved a weak path through the dark, and the radio crackled with static, unable to hold a signal. Thanet gripped the wheel, his jaw tight. He hated driving in storms, too many variables, too little control. The clock read 10:47 p.m., and exhaustion tugged at his eyes. Almost there, he muttered, though the GPS had lost its way miles back. He felt isolated, the world shrinking to the roar of rain and the thud of his heartbeat. Then, through the blur of water, he saw her. She stood at the road's edge, a lone silhouette against the swaying bamboo. Thanet squinted, slowing the truck. A woman, drenched and motionless, her arm raised as if hailing him. She wore an odd outfit, flowing fabric that shimmered faintly, a headdress glinting despite the dark. A dancer, he thought, confusion cutting through his fatigue. No one sane would be out here in this weather, yet there she was, unwavering as the rain lashed her. He hesitated. Common sense screamed to keep driving strangers on back roads, spelled trouble, but a pang of guilt stopped him. What if she's hurt? He reasoned, picturing Golf stranded and helpless. He pulled over, tires squelching in the mud, and rolled down the window. Rain stung his face as he shouted, "Hey, you okay? Need a lift?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glided toward the truck, her movements eerily smooth, like a puppet on strings. Thanet's gut twisted, a flicker of unease he couldn't place. Up close, her chador headdress sparkled with wet gold. Her fastened skirt clung to her legs, and her face pell, too pale, remained shadowed. "Get in," he called, louder now, over the storm's roar. She nodded, a slow, deliberate motion, and slipped into the back seat without opening the door. Thanet blinked, his mind scrambling. Must have missed it, he told himself, though his hands shook as he shifted gears. The cab filled with a faint scent, jasmine, sweet and cloying, cutting through the damp musk of rain. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but the angle was wrong. He couldn't see her face. "Where you headed?" he asked, forcing calm into his voice. Silence, only the patter of rain and the hum of the engine answered. He swallowed, unease growing into a cold knot in his chest. Thanet drove on, the road twisting through the storm. The silence gnawed at him, heavier than the rain. He tried again. "You, from around here. What's with the costume?" No reply. A chill crept up his spine, and he risked another glance in the mirror. The seat was emptier, so it seemed. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow shifting where she should be. His heart lurched. "Focus on the road," he muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. Then it began, a soft, rhythmic sound, barely audible over the rain. Ching-ching, like cymbals tapped in time. Thanet's breath hitched. The sound grew, joined by the mournful wail of a painai, weaving a melody that felt both beautiful and wrong. It came from inside the truck, from behind him. "What the hell?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The jasmine scent thickened, cloying now, suffocating, and the air turned cold, his breath fogging in the cab. He slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop. "Who's there?" he shouted, twisting around. The back seat was empty, no woman, no dancer, just his tarp and toolbox. Relief washed over him, tinged with confusion. Losing it, he laughed shakily, rubbing his eyes. But as he turned back, the music swelled, deafening now, and the mirror showed her sitting there, staring at him. Her face was a nightmare. Eyes black and hollow, skin dripping, wet and grey, lips curled in a faint, eerie smile. Thanet screamed, a raw sound torn from his throat, and fumbled for the door. The locks clicked shut on their own, trapping him inside. The dancer leaned forward, her cold fingers brushing his neck. Thanet thrashed, slamming his elbow against the window, but it wouldn't break. The music pulsed, a frenzied ramtie rhythm, and the cab seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. Her voice slithered into his mind, not heard but felt, a whisper of silk and venom. You stopped for me, now you see me. Images flooded his vision. Lam Yai laughing with her troop, her lover's hands tightening round her throat, the rain swallowing her screams. Thanet felt her pain, her rage, a weight that crushed his chest. I didn't do this, he yelled, tears streaming down his face. Let me go. But she tilted her head, her smile widening, and the truck shook as if caught in a tempest. The dashboard lights flickered, the engine sputtered, and the scent of jasmine turned rancid decay, blood, wet earth. Thanet's hands clawed at the wheel, his mind unraveling. He saw her in the mirrors, now dozens of her, reflections dancing in sync, their hollow eyes locked on him. The truck jolted forward, moving on its own, tires spinning through the mud as she guided it deeper into the night. Terror gave way to despair. Golf, he thought, guilt stabbing him. He'd never reach his brother, never fix this. The dancer's touch spread, a numbness creeping up his arms, and he felt himself slipping, his body swaying to her rhythm, his will eroding. No, 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 he sobbed. But the music drowned him, pulling him into her dance. Hours bled together, or minutes. Time dissolved in the storm. Thanet's strength faded, his shouts reduced to whimpers. Then, abruptly, the music stopped. The truck halted, the locks clicked open, and the dancer was gone. Warmth seeped back into the cab, the jasmine scent fading to a faint memory. Thanet sat, trembling, staring at the empty back seat. His flashlight lay there, untouched, beside a single wet petal. He stumbled out, rain soaking him instantly, and checked the truck. No signs of Herno footprints, no marks only, the petal and the echo of Ching Ching in his ears. He drove on, autopilot guiding him to the clinic, where Golf waited, pale but alive. What took you so long? Golf asked, but Thanet couldn't answer. His throat burned, his mind replayed her face, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back in Chiang Mai, Thanet tried to forget. He fixed cars, avoided rain, and told no one, not even Golf, what happened. But the nights betrayed him. He'd wake to the sound of Pai Nai, the smell of jasmine, and the sensation of cold fingers on his neck. A rash appeared thin, wet lines like strangulation, marks fading by day, returning by night. One evening, driving home in a drizzle, he saw her again standing on the roadside, her headdress glinting. He sped past, heart racing, but the music followed, faint and persistent. Lamaye had seen him, claimed him, and the rain would always bring her back. The dancer of the abandoned palace, in the province of Ratchaburi, Thailand, where rolling hills meet tangled jungles, there lies a relic of a bygone era. The Pra Nekon Kiri, Palasor, what remains of it? Once a summer retreat for royalty during the reign of King Rama IV, its grandeur has long faded, swallowed by time and neglect. Locals call it Wong Ro, the abandoned palace, a sprawling maze of crumbling walls, overgrown courtyards and shadowed halls. Few dare to approach it after dusk, for whispers of a tragic tale cling to its stones, tale of a dancer, beloved and betrayed, whose spirit refuses to rest. Her name was Nang Thim, an Ataki court dancer of unparalleled grace, favored by the palace's lord, Chow Freya Sharia Wong. But beauty and favor bred envy. Legend says she was murdered in a fit of jealous rage by a rival concubine, her body left to rot in a hidden chamber. The killer was never found, and the palace, stained by her blood, was abandoned soon after. For over a century, villagers have claimed to hear faint strains of traditional Thai music pai, fat ensembles of Renat Ek and Kongwong drifting from the ruins, accompanied by the silhouette of a dancer swaying in the moonlight. Those who linger too long speak of a face marred by wounds, a gaze that pierces the soul, and a presence that promises no peace. It was March 20th, 2025, when Krit, a 28-year-old freelance photographer from Bangkok, first heard of Wang Ro. He was no stranger to the macabre. His portfolio brimmed with images of derelict temples, forgotten cemeteries, and haunted bridges, each frame capturing the beauty of decay. His latest obsession was urban exploration, fueled by a restless need to uncover the unseen. Krit wasn't a believer in ghosts, but he thrived on the adrenaline of trespassing where others feared to tread. The palace, with its dark history, was his next target. The idea came from a late-night scroll through a Thai ghost story forum. A user named Shadow Seeker had posted a grainy photo of Wang Rao's courtyard, claiming to have heard music and seen a figure in a window. The thread exploded with warnings. Don't go alone, she'll follow you home. The dancer doesn't forgive intruders. But Krit dismissed them as superstition. He felt a thrill, a tingling in his chest that mingled excitement with defiance. Armed with his Nikon camera, a flashlight, and a backpack of supplies, he set out for Ratchaburi, determined to document the palace's secrets. The drive from Bangkok was long and uneventful, the highway giving way to winding rural roads flanked by rice paddies and looming hills. Krit's mind buzzed with anticipation, though a faint unease gnawed at him. He'd told no one where he was going. Not his sister, not his editor, just left a vague note. Out on a shoot, back in a few days. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, he arrived at the base of Khao Wang Hill, where the palace perched like a silent sentinel. The air was thick with humidity as Krit parked his battered Toyota at the foot of the hill. A faded sign warned trespassers away, but the path, a cracked stone stairway, overgrown with moss, beckoned him upward. He adjusted his backpack, the weight of his gear grounding him, and began the climb. The forest pressed in close, its canopy blocking the last rays of daylight. Cicadas screeched in a deafening chorus, and the scent of damp earth filled his lungs. Every few steps, he paused to snap photos, a broken railing, a gnarled tree root piercing the stone, a lizard skittering into the undergrowth. Halfway up, Krit felt a shift. The cicadas fell silent, replaced by a stillness so profound it pressed against his eardrums. He stopped, heart thudding, and glanced around. Nothing moved, not a leaf, not a breeze. Just my imagination, he muttered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. He checked his watch. 7:14 p.m. Night had fully descended, and the beam of his flashlight carved a frail path through the gloom. As he neared the palace gates, a faint sound reached him, rhythmic tapping like bamboo striking bamboo. He froze, straining to listen. It grew clearer, the melodic chime of a Renat Ek, the wooden xylophone of Thai classical music, joined by the mournful wail of a painai. Krit's pulse quickened. Someone's up there, he thought, though reason argued otherwise. The palace had been abandoned for decades. No electricity, no residents. Curiosity overpowered caution, and he pressed on, the music guiding him like a siren's call. The gates loomed ahead, rusted iron twisted into ornate patterns, now choked with vines. Krit pushed them open, wincing at the groan of metal, and stepped into the courtyard. The palace sprawled before him, its tiled roofs sagging, its walls stained black by mold. Broken statues of Garudas and Nagas flanked the entrance, their stone eyes watching him with eerie indifference. The music swelled, echoing off the stones, though its source remained elusive. Krit's flashlight swept the scene, illuminating shattered tiles and creeping ivy. He felt exposed, a trespasser in a place that didn't welcome the living. Yet the photographer in him took over. Click, 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 capturing the decay in sharp detail. "This is gold," he whispered, adrenaline masking the growing chill in his spine. He ventured deeper, past a collapsed pavilion and into the main hall, where shadows danced in the corners of his vision. The hall was vast, its ceiling lost to darkness, its floor littered with debris. A faded mural of celestial dancers adorned one wall, their painted smiles uncanny in the gloom. Crit's breath caught as the music shifted faster now, urgent, the tempo of a ram-wang dance. He turned, expecting to find nothing, but his beam landed on something that stopped his heart. Footprints, bare, wet, and impossibly delicate, they trailed across the dusty floor, leading toward a narrow corridor. "Who's there?" he called, his voice trembling despite himself. No answer came, only the relentless music. Crit's mind raced pranksters, squatters, but his gut screamed otherwise. He followed the prints, each step heavier than the last, his flashlight shaking in his grip. The corridor twisted deeper into the palace, its walls closing in, the air growing colder. Crit's breath fogged before him, a stark contrast to the humid night outside. The footprints ended at a heavy teak door, its surface carved with lotus motifs, its edges splintered as if clawed at. The music pulsed from within, now joined by a soft, rhythmic tapping, bare feet on wood, moving in time with the melody. Crit's hand hovered over the door. Fear clawed at him, a primal urge to flee, but his stubborn pride held firm. "I've come this far," he thought, swallowing hard. He pushed the door open, and the hinges shrieked like a dying animal. The room beyond was small, a chamber untouched by time. Silk tapestries hung in tatters. A low altar bore faded offerings, wilted flowers. Broken incense stick sand in the center stood a figure. She was a vision from another era, a Nartaki in full regalia. Her chador headdress glittered with dulled gold, her silk fasin shimmered faintly, and her arms moved with liquid grace, tracing the arcs of a traditional dance. Crit stood transfixed, awe warring with terror. She was beautiful until she turned. Her face was a ruin. Deep gashes crisscrossed her cheeks, oozing black ichor that dripped onto her chest. Her eyes were hollow pits, yet they burned with a malevolent light, locking onto him. Her lips parted in a smile, too wide, revealing jagged teeth stained with blood. The music crescendoed, a cacophony of clashing notes, and Crit's knees buckled. "Who? What are you?" he stammered, stumbling back. The dancer didn't speak. She glided forward, her feet hovering an inch above the floor, her movements unnaturally smooth. Crit's flashlight flickered, casting her shadow in jagged bursts across the walls, a shadow that stretched far beyond her form, clawing at the ceiling. Panic seized him. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled his bones. The air thickened, pressing against his chest, and a voice not heard but felt, deep in his skull, whispered, "You saw me, now you stay." Crit pounded on the door, his fists bruising against the unyielding wood. The room grew frigid, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The dancer circled him, her dance unbroken, her wounded face inches from his. He could smell her rotting flowers, old blood decaying. His stomach churned. "I'm sorry," he cried, though he didn't know what for. "I didn't mean to." Her head tilted, an unnatural angle, and the whispering intensified, a chorus of voices overlapping in rage and sorrow. Crit's flashlight died, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint glow of her headdress. He fumbled for his camera, instinct driving him to document the impossible, but the lens refused to focus. Each shot a blur of light and shadow. The tapping of her feet grew louder, faster, a staccato that matched his racing heart. He felt her presence behind him, her cold fingers brushing his neck, and he screamed a raw, guttural sound that echoed in the confined space. The walls seemed to pulse, the tapestries writhing as if alive, and the altar trembled, spilling its offerings onto the floor. Crit sank to his knees, clutching his head. Memories flashed unbidden, his childhood fear of the dark, his mother's warnings about spirits, the forum posts he'd scoffed at. Regret flooded him, bitter and suffocating. I shouldn't have come here, he thought, tears streaming down his face. The dancer loomed over him, her smile widening until it split her face, and he felt a puller-draining sensation, as if his very essence was being siphoned away. Hours passed or minutes. Time lost meaning in that chamber. Crit's strength waned, his body heavy, his mind fogged with despair. Yet a spark of defiance flickered. I won't die here, he growled, forcing himself to stand. He groped for the door, fingers scraping splinters, and threw his weight against it. The wood creaked, then gave way, spilling him into the corridor. The music followed, relentless, as he staggered through the palace. Shadows twisted around him, hands reaching from the walls, but he ran blindly, desperately toward the courtyard. The dancer's laughter rang out, a sound like breaking glass, and he felt her breath on his neck, her nails grazing his back. No, no, no. He sobbed, tripping over debris, his knees bloodying on the stone. He burst into the open air, the night sky a stark relief. The music faded, the presence receding, but Crit didn't stop. He stumbled down the hill, branches tearing at his skin, until he reached his car. Hands shaking, he fumbled the keys, started the engine, and sped away, the palace shrinking in his rearview mirror. Crit made it back to Bangkok, but he was not the same. Sleep eluded him. Every night, he heard the faint chime of a Ranatek, saw her wounded face in his dreams. His photos from Wong Ro were corrupted except one, a single frame of the dancer, her eyes staring through the lens into him. He burned the memory card, but the image lingered in his mind. Weeks later, a rash appeared on his neck thin, red lines like claw marks. Doctors couldn't explain it, but Crit knew. Nang Phim had marked him, a reminder of his intrusion. He abandoned photography, retreating to a quiet life, but the whispers never stopped. You saw me, now you stay. The abandoned palace stands still, its halls echoing with her dance, waiting for the next fool to cross its threshold. The dancers of the old-school auditorium, in the heart of Thailand's northeastern Aizen region, where the land stretches flat and endless under a merciless sun, stands Ban Pho Tak School, a boarding institution once bustling with life. Decades ago, it was a beacon of education for rural children, its red-tiled roofs and wooden dormitories a symbol of hope amid the rice fields. But time and neglect have taken their toll. Most of its buildings now lean warily, overtaken by weeds and whispers of the past. At its edge lies the old auditorium, a cavernous structure of weathered teak and cracked concrete, abandoned since a fire claimed it in the 1970s. The auditorium was once the pride of the school, a stage for traditional Thai performances where students trained as Naatokis dancers of classical Kon and Lakon. Legend tells of a troop of girls, the finest Nang Ram the school had ever seen, who vanished in that fire. Their deaths were sudden, their bodies never fully accounted for, and the cause of the blaze remains a mystery. Some say it was an accidental lantern tipped over during a late rehearsal. Others whisper of darker truths, jealousy, sabotage, or a teacher's wrath gone too far. Since then, the auditorium has stood silent, or so it seems. Students and locals swear they hear the chime of Qing small cymbals on windless nights, and shadowy figures dance within its walls, only to vanish when approached. It was late March 2025 when Pim, a 16-year-old girl from Udon Thani, arrived at Ban Pho Tak School. She was a reluctant transfer student, sent by her struggling parents to board there after their farm failed. Pim was quiet but sharp-eyed, her long black hair often tied back in a practical braid. She carried little with her duffel bag, a worn notebook, and a lingering resentment toward the dusty, isolated place she now called home. With her came Tun, her cousin, a lanky boy of 17 with a mischievous streak and a habit of poking into things he shouldn't. Tun had begged to join her, claiming he'd rather face boarding school than his strict father's endless lectures. Their first day was uneventful, stifling classrooms, bland rice porridge, and stern teachers barking rules. But as dusk fell, the other students grew restless, whispering about the auditorium. "Don't go near it after dark," a girl named Noi warned, her voice low as they sat in the dormitory. "The Nangram are still there. They don't like strangers." Pim rolled her eyes. She'd heard ghost stories before, and they never scared her. Tun, though, grinned, his curiosity piqued. "Sounds like fun," he said, nudging Pim. "Want to check it out?" "No way," she snapped, though a flicker of intrigue stirred in her chest. She hated admitting it, but Tun's reckless energy was infectious. That night, as the dorm fell quiet, she lay awake, the seed of adventure taking root. By the third night, Tun's pestering wore her down. "Come on, Pim," he whispered from his bunk across the hall, just a peek. "If it's nothing, I'll owe you a soda." The moon hung low, casting silver light through the cracked windows, and the air buzzed with the hum of crickets. Pim sighed, her resolve crumbling. "Fine, but if we get caught, it's your fault." They slipped out of the dorm, barefoot to muffle their steps. The cool earth beneath their feet, a stark contrast to the day's heat. The school grounds were eerily still, the silhouettes of tamarind trees swaying faintly. The auditorium loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the night sky, its double doors sealed with a rusted chain. Tun pulled a hairpin from Pim's braid. "Borrowing this," he said, with a wink, and set to work on the lock. Pim's heart thudded, a mix of annoyance and nervous excitement. "This is stupid," she muttered, glancing over her shoulder. The chain clattered to the ground, and Tun pushed the doors open. A wave of stale air rushed out, thick with the scent of mold and charred wood. Pim hesitated, her bravado faltering, but Tun grabbed her wrist and pulled her inside. "Too late to chicken out now," he teased. She glared but followed, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The auditorium was a tomb of shadows. Their beams cut through the dark, revealing rows of splintered benches, a collapsed stage, and walls blackened by old fire. Cobwebs draped the rafters like funeral shrouds, and the floor creaked underfoot, groaning with every step. Pim felt a chill, though the night was warm and her skin prickled as if watched. "This place is creepy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant drone of frogs. Tun, undeterred, climbed onto the stage, kicking up clouds of dust. "Imagine performing here," he said, striking a mock dance pose. Pim forced a laugh, but it died in her throat as a sound pierced the silence of faint. Metallic ching-ching, like cymbals tapped in rhythm. They froze, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Tun asked, his grin fading. "It's just the wind," Pim said, though no breeze stirred the heavy air. The sound came again, clearer now, joined by the soft thud of a taffin drum. Her stomach twisted. "Ton, let's go." But he was already moving toward the back of the stage, where a curtain hung in tatters. "Wait, look at this," he called, pointing to the floor. Footprints, small, bare, and fresh, dotted the dust, leading behind the curtain. Pim's breath hitched. "No one's been here in years," she said, her voice shaking. Tun's bravado wavered, but he pushed the curtain aside, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. The music grew louder, a haunting melody of kongwong gongs and painai pipes, pulling them downward like a thread. "We have to see," Tun said, his curiosity outweighing his fear. Pim wanted to scream at him, to drag him back, but her legs moved against her will, following him into the abyss. The stairs spiraled into a basement Pim hadn't known existed, a rehearsal room. Its walls lined with cracked mirrors, its floor scorched black. The air was frigid, heavy with the stench of ash and something sweeter, like rotting jasmine. The music swelled, a full pie-fat ensemble now, its notes sharp and discordant. Pim's flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows, and Tun's bravado crumbled. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, clutching her arm. Before she could answer, the mirrors lit up not with their reflections, but with figures. Dozens of girls, clad in shimmering fascine skirts and golden chador headdresses, materialized in the glass. They moved in unison, their arms arching gracefully, their feet tapping the unseen floor in perfect rhythm. Pim's heart pounded, awe and terror colliding. They were beautiful until they turned. Their faces were charred, skin peeling away to reveal bone, eyes sunken and glowing faintly red. Some grinned with lipless mouths, others wept black tears that stained their chests. The mirrors rippled, and the dancers stepped out, their forms solidifying in the room. Pim screamed, dropping her flashlight, but Ton stood rooted, his face pale. "Pim, they're real," he choked out. The dancers surrounded them, their movements hypnotic yet menacing. The air pulsed with their rhythm, the ching-ching deafening now, drowning out Pim's cries. She felt trapped, her body swaying involuntarily to the beat, as if drawn into their dance. Tun grabbed her hand, pulling her back, but the dancers closed in, their cold fingers brushing her skin, icy, clammy, wrong. One dancer stepped forward, taller than the rest, her headdress adorned with wilted flowers. Her face was the worst half burned, half intact, a grotesque mask of beauty and ruin. She raised a hand and the music stopped, leaving a silence that crushed Pim's chest. The dancer's voice rasped, dry as ash. "You came to us. Now you join us." Pim's mind reeled. "We didn't mean to," she stammered, but the dancer cut her off, her hollow eyes boring into her. "We burned, we waited. You woke us." Images flooded Pim's mind, girls laughing as they rehearsed, a lantern flickering, a scream as flames erupted, a teacher fleeing as the troupe perished. Jealousy had sparked the fire, a rival's revenge against the favored dancers, and their spirits had lingered, bound to the auditorium by rage and sorrow. Tun sobbed, his bravado shattered. I'm sorry," he cried, but the dancers tightened their circle, their hands clawing at the air. Pim felt a pull, a draining sensation, as if her warmth was seeping into them. Her legs buckled, her vision blurring, and she saw herself in the mirrors dancing with them, her face beginning to char. Desperation surged through Pim. "No," she shouted, shoving Tun toward the stairs. The dancers lunged, their nails raking her arms, but she fought, dragging Tun upward. The music resumed, a frenzied tempo that shook the walls, dust raining from the ceiling. They stumbled into the auditorium. The dancers' laughter a high, keening, well chasing them. Pim's flashlight was gone, but moonlight streamed through broken windows, guiding them to the doors. They burst outside, collapsing onto the grass as the doors slammed shut behind them. The music faded, replaced by the chirping of crickets, but Pim's heart wouldn't slow. Tun clutched her, tears streaming down his face. "What were they?" he whispered. Pim couldn't answer, her throat burned, her body ached, and a cold dread settled in her bones. She'd felt them, their pain, their hunger, and she knew they hadn't let go. Back in the dorm, Pim and Tun swore never to speak of that night. But the marks remained, faint burns on their arms, unexplainable to the school nurse. Sleep brought nightmares of dancing in flames, of faces peeling away. The other students noticed their silence, their haunted eyes, and the rumors grew. Weeks later, Pim heard it again, the ching-ching, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the auditorium. She looked out her window and saw them, shadows swaying in the moonlight, waiting. Tun refused to look, burying himself in his blankets, but Pim knew. They'd seen her, they'd claimed her, and one day they'd call her back to dance. The shadow in the mirror, nestled deep within the untamed forests of northern Thailand, far from the hum of city life, lay the village of Ban Phakar. It was a place forgotten by time, where the trees grew so thick they swallowed the sunlight, and the air carried a perpetual dampness that clung to the skin. The villagers were a quiet folk, bound by traditions and unspoken rules, their lives governed by the cycles of rice planting and the whispers of the spirits they believed lingered in the shadows. Among the weathered wooden houses stood one that drew more hushed tales than any other, the home of Grandma Samniang. Grandma Samniang was an enigma, wiry old woman with sharp eyes and a voice that rasped like dry leaves. She lived alone in a creaking two-story house at the edge of the village, its walls stained black by decades of monsoon rains. The villagers often spoke of strange occurrences there, footsteps echoing in the dead of night, faint murmurs drifting through the walls, and shadowy figures glimpsed in the windows when the moon hung low. Samniang dismissed it all with a wave of her gnarled hand, insisting she lived alone. But the villagers knew better. They avoided her home after dusk, and no one dared ask about the locked room at the back of the house, or the ancient mirror said to reside within it. It was March 2025 when Kao, a 17-year-old girl from Bangkok, arrived in Ban Phakar. She was a city child through and through, with long dark hair, bright eyes, and a restless energy that clashed with the village's stillness. Her parents had sent her to live with Grandma Samniang, her maternal grandmother, after a messy divorce left their family fractured. Kao wasn't thrilled about trading neon lights and bustling streets for a remote village where the only sounds were crickets and the occasional barking dog. But she had no choice. She arrived with a single suitcase, her phone useless without signal, and a simmering curiosity about the grandmother she barely knew. Samniang greeted her with a curt nod and a bowl of sticky rice. "You'll sleep upstairs," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "Don't wander at night. The house is old, it creaks." Kao nodded, sensing the weight behind the words but too tired to question them. That first night, she lay in her narrow bed, listening to the symphony of the forest outside. The wind rattled the shutters, and the floorboards groaned as if the house itself were restless. She drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of a figure standing at the foot of her bed, its face obscured by shadow. The next morning, Cal met some of the village kids while fetching water from the communal well. They were a shy bunch, but one boy, Chai, a wiry 12-year-old with a gap-toothed grin, was bold enough to speak. "You're staying with Grandma Samniang?" he asked wide-eyed. "Don't you know about her house?" "What about it?" Cal replied, intrigued. Chai lowered his voice. "They say there's something in there with her, something that watches. My uncle saw a shadow in the window once, but Grandma was out in the fields. And then there's the mirror." "What mirror?" Cal pressed. "In the back room. It's older than the village, maybe. They say it doesn't just show you, it shows something else, something that shouldn't be there." Chai shivered, though the morning sun was warm. No one's supposed to go in that room. Grandma keeps it locked. Cal laughed it off, chalking it up to rural superstition. But as she walked back to the house, Chai's words lingered, planting a seed of curiosity that refused to fade. Days turned into weeks, and Cal settled into a routine of helping Samniang with chores, feeding the chickens, tending the vegetable patch, and hauling water from the well. The house, though old, had a strange charm. Faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls. A rickety staircase led to the upper floor, and every corner seemed to hold a story. But the back room remained a mystery. Its door, made of heavy teak, was always locked with an iron padlock that looked older than Cal herself. She asked Samniang about it once, casually, over dinner. "What's in that room, Grandma?" Samniang's spoon paused mid-air. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said sharply. "Just storage, old junk. Stay out of it." Her tone left no room for argument, but it only fueled Kai's growing obsession. Late one afternoon, while Samniang was napping, Cal crept downstairs with a hairpin she'd found in her suitcase. She'd seen enough movies to know how to pick a lock, or so she thought. Kneeling before the door, she fumbled with the padlock, her heart pounding. The house was silent, save for the faint ticking of a clock in the living room. After several frustrating minutes, the lock clicked open. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, then pushed the door ajar. In the far corner, draped with a stained white sheet, stood the object Chai had mentioned. The mirror. It was taller than Cal. Its wooden frame carved with intricate patterns that might have been beautiful once, but were now weathered and chipped. She approached it slowly, her sandals scuffing against the warped floorboards. With a trembling hand, she pulled the sheet away. The mirror's surface was cloudy, streaked with scratches and faint discoloration, but it still reflected her image clearly. Her long hair, her wide eyes, the white tank top she wore. She stared at herself, feeling a chill despite the humid air. Then something shifted. Her reflection blinked, though she hadn't. A slow, unnatural smile spread across its face, stretching wider than her own mouth ever could. Cal stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. "What the hell?" she whispered. She blinked hard, hoping it was a trick of the light, but when she looked again, the smile was gone. Her reflection stared back, normal once more. Shaken, she grabbed the sheet to cover the mirror, but as she turned to leave, a faint sound stopped her whisper, soft and guttural, like wind through dry grass. "Cal." She froze. The voice had come from behind her, from the mirror. She didn't dare turn around. Instead, she bolted from the room, slamming the door shut and fumbling to snap the padlock back into place. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the hairpin twice before succeeding. That night, Cal couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the incident in her mind. Had she imagined it? The villagers' superstitions were getting to her, she reasoned. Old houses made noises. Mirrors played tricks. Still, when she closed her eyes, she saw that unnatural smile, and the whisper echoed in her ears. Around midnight, she heard it again, not from her memory, but from the house itself. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking along the hallway downstairs. She sat up, clutching her blanket. The sound paused, then resumed, growing louder as it approached the stairs. Thud, thud, thud. Each step reverberated through the wooden frame of the house. Kai's heart raced. She wanted to call out to Samyang, whose room was across the hall, but her voice caught in her throat. The footsteps stopped at the base of the stairs. Silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Then, a new sound, a low, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood. It came from the direction of the back room. Cal pulled the blanket over her head, praying it would stop. Eventually, it did, and she drifted into a fitful sleep, plagued by nightmares of a faceless figure standing before a mirror, its mouth gaping in a silent scream. The next morning, she confronted Samyang over breakfast. "Grandma, I heard something last night." Footsteps, tapping. It was coming from that room. Samyang's face tightened. She set her bowl down and fixed Kao with a piercing stare. "I told you not to bother with that room. You didn't go in there, did you?" Kao hesitated, then lied. "No, I just heard things." Samyang's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. "Old houses make noises," she muttered, echoing Kai's own excuse. Ignore it. But Kao couldn't ignore it. That evening, while Samyang was at a neighbor's, she returned to the back room. She had to know if it was real. Armed with a flashlight from the kitchen, she unlocked the door again and stepped inside. The mirror stood as before, uncovered now, its surface gleaming faintly in the beam of light. She steeled herself and looked into it. Her reflection stared back, normal at first. Then, its head tilted slightly in movement she hadn't made. The eyes darkened, the pupils shrinking to pinpoints, and the mouth twisted into that same grotesque smile. Kai's stomach dropped. Before she could react, the reflection raised a hand, pressing it against the inside of the glass. The mirror rippled like water, and a bony, withered hand began to emerge, its nails long and yellowed. Kao screamed and swung the flashlight, striking the mirror. The glass cracked with a sound like breaking ice, and the hand recoiled. She ran, locking the door behind her, and hid in her room until Samyang returned. The next day, Kao couldn't keep it in any longer. She told Samyang everything, the reflection, the voice, the hand. Her grandmother listened in stony silence, her face growing paler with each word. When Kao finished, Samyang sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "You shouldn't have gone in there," she said. "That mirror, it's not just a mirror, it's a door." "A door," Kao echoed, incredulous. "To where?" "To something we don't understand. Something old. Older than me, older than this village. My mother, your great-grandmother, she brought it here. Said it was a gift from a traveling monk, but I never believed that. She used to talk to it, late at night. Said it showed her things. After she died, I locked it away. I thought that would be the end of it." "What's in there, Grandma?" Kai's voice trembled. Samyang shook her head. "I don't know. A spirit, maybe. Or something worse. It's been quiet for years until you came." Kao felt a pang of guilt. "What do we do?" "We don't do anything," Samyang snapped. "You stay away from it. I'll deal with it." But Samyang's dealing with it amounted to little more than muttering prayers and sprinkling salt around the house. The disturbances grew worse. Shadows moved in the corners of Kai's vision. The tapping became scratching, then pounding. One night, she woke to find her bedroom door ajar, though she'd locked it. Footprints bare, wet, and impossibly small trailed from her bed to the stairs. A week later, Kao decided she couldn't take it anymore. She had to destroy the mirror. While Sam Niang was out, she gathered a hammer from the shed and marched to the back room. The air inside was colder than before, the mirror's cracked surface glinting ominously. Her reflection was absent now. Instead, a figure stood in the glasser woman, ancient and gaunt, her hair a tangle of white, her eyes milky and blind. Her mouth stretched into a grin that split her face, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Cow," the figure hissed, its voice echoing inside her skull. "You opened the door. Now you belong to us." Cow raised the hammer and swung with all her strength. The mirror shattered, shards flying everywhere, and a gust of frigid air erupted from the frame. The figure vanished, but the room filled with whispers dozens, hundreds of voices overlapping in a cacophony of rage and despair. Cow dropped the hammer and ran, locking the door behind her. When Sam Niang returned, she found Cow curled up in the kitchen, pale and trembling. The older woman went to the back room, saw the broken mirror, and cursed under her breath. "You've let it out," she said. "It's not trapped anymore." The disturbances didn't stop. The footsteps grew louder, the shadows bolder. Objects moved on their own cups, sliding across tables, doors slamming shut. Cow refused to enter the back room again, but she felt its presence everywhere. At night, she'd wake to the sensation of being watched, and once she glimpsed a figure at the edge of her bed tall, thin and smiling. Sam Niang tried to appease whatever had been unleashed, leaving offerings of rice and incense, but it only seemed to grow stronger. The villagers began to notice 2 dogs howled at the house. Children refused to pass by. Cow begged to leave, but Sam Niang insisted they stay. "It's tied to us now," she said. "Running won't help." Months later, Cow sat on the porch, staring into the darkening forest. The air was still, but she felt it a gaze, unblinking and eternal, watching her from somewhere unseen. She knew it would never leave. The mirror was gone, but what it had held was free, and it had claimed her as its own.